Right, I clearly, in what is now part one, failed to do it in 15 minutes, but I thought I'd keep going. So this is part two. So continuing where we left off, we didn't get anything with primary contact ID. So I'm just going to try account name. So again, look at field name. This is the one it's going to be after. And I'm just going to pop that in there. And I have a feeling it's probably because I'll just do column width because the table has no information in this environment. So, but that, trust me when I say the column name is very particular and you can get the particular name by looking at the fields you've added. Similarly, if you want to select an item that is present in the details list, you may be in a situation where you're thinking, why is it not brought through the complete set of columns against a selected item? And that is all down to what you select here. So you don't have to necessarily surface it by doing that col_items property, but you will need to add it in here, and that this will dictate what the collection contains for use further on in the app. You could, of course, probably use the unique ID of the item in lookup, and that would do a similar thing, but I think this is probably a better way of doing it. Just add all of the columns in here that you're going to want to make use of, and then similarly here, add all of the columns that you actually want to be visible in this details list. And then you would just rinse and repeat and just add however many columns you want to surface, whilst mainly changing the col name and the display name. So another core kind of got you, or kind of got me, maybe I'm just doing it completely wrong, is that there is in the properties, there is a raison row selection. And if you look here, let me just get into the right context. There is an on select and an on change. Now, I personally found that on select didn't really do anything, but I needed on change. And this kind of threw me a bit when I first did this. But again, if we go to the reference app, and if we look here, so you can actually see that the on select in this instance is actually setting a variable of basically the selected item. So I think that just really collects what's been selected rather than actions anything. But and I could be speaking out of turn here, but this is just, I'm kind of speaking as I'm working through it in my head. But the on change, again, similar to the self item key that we did for the pivot control, you tap into the event. So if we look at on change here, this isn't actually the one I was expecting. Let me do a control there. Well, we'll take this anyway. Sort. So there are different event names. I don't think it's going to be helpful and show you, but there's a select, and then that's what you can use to choose. Just seeing if I can find it. Raison row selection type. selected key. Seems to be a completely different formula to what I was expecting. Because there was one that she showed you it came up with a notification to say that the row had been selected. Because you've got the selection there. Just thinking if I changed anything here. Right, I decided to spare you of my fumbling around, and I just thought rather than have an example of working with thin air, I've since gone into the Dataverse table and populated a single record in the accounts table. Just to quickly call out my point with regards to the name, for the details list, you might be forgiven for going, okay, the internal name is name with an uppercase, but it seems to always want it in lowercase. But as I say, the only thing you really need to remember is add in the fields that you'll need. Then the ones that you want to surface in the details list, just select them and look at how it's presented in the field name property. Another thing that was throwing me, I don't know why, in this one example, I decided to demonstrate on how I use the Creator Kit. It decided to give me a load of curveballs that I've never encountered before, but it actually had the cell type as an image. And whilst ever that was the case, it basically wasn't showing it, presumably because it's like, well, you've not given me an image. So just be mindful of that. You might need to weed out some of these properties. So that's that. Finally, I'm going to end on another one of my faves, which is the context menu. And sorry, just to round it off, when I was struggling to find the event name for the on change, again, you can't beat the good old throw a label on the screen and see what an output is. But once I'd selected a row, and in this label, I'd got it as the details list dot event name, I could see that it was on row selection change. So for the on change to instigate something after selecting a row, you would want to use that as your event name on row selection change, and that will pick up when you select. Just again, I am relatively new to this myself. I found ways of working to give me what I need, and I have a sneaking suspicion that I'm missing a trick. But if you go or end up down the path that I have, you may find yourself in an infinite loop where you say navigate to a screen after selecting it, all well and good. It performs the action you want to do when you select a row. But when you come back to the original screen, it fires the on change again and it keeps taking you back. So the way I've combated that is to basically, in the on change, kind of do that and do something along the lines of self dot selected. I just pick a value that I know should have something in, like that, and just basically go not blank or empty. I think I've just done empty if I do the entire record, and doing it that way gets you the. Let's make sure the formula is not completely wrong. Doing it that way, it kind of, when it comes back to the screen, by default, it doesn't retain the selection. and then it's not going to do it because it will be blank. And then when you actually select it, it will fire the on-row selection change event, and it won't be blank, and then it will execute. Again, I need to look into it a bit more because I'm sure that just doesn't seem right, but it does work. So back to what I was saying before. Finally, we're going to end on my good old friend, the context menu, and I absolutely love this. Another thing that I've not actually made use of is just coming back to, we're already in the template app, on the control screen. Again, like I say, this gives you an example, because I think by default it looks at the account. So now I've got the record in there. Again, you can see how it's stacked, the name and address line one all on one row, and you can just make use of these properties. Similarly, I could have copied the save menu. So where I've been using the Creator Kit reference app, for some of the controls that are in here, I can quickly see that the items are made up of this. So if we come back into our app, get to the right screen, come here, populate the items with that. And you can see here, this is going with the concept of save, delete check marks. Then you're thinking, okay, so how do I determine the item that's shown at the top? And I'm just going to do, so in this instance, it's going to show the first one, but you can do root. In this instance, I am actually going to use the Creator Kit example. And I'm going to come down to my table here, because what I want to show you here is I quite like to make use of the disabled. So I like to do it if it's a new item, like edit and delete won't be available, but if you've selected an item in the details list, then it will be enabled, and that's controlled by this. Again, this is showing a root, so you may not actually want, so I'm going to put action, and then attempt to have new, rename, edit, for example. And then you can see action here. And just, it's fantastic how quickly got a nice looking actionable menu. And similar to what we've done with these other labels, again, just to use our favorite word of the day, pivot, to pivot off of it, we can do things based on the item key of the selected value. Into item key, and if we just play, click through this a few times, we do new item, rename, edit, and that becomes the critical way of making something happen. Similarly to making other things react based on what's selected, I think in this instance it actually makes sense, and it is the on select. But again, you could do a similar thing to like if, or you might actually be able to use a switch in this case, because you might do switch self. I think you have to do selected dot item key, and then your value would just become like new item, and then what do I want to do? Switch. When it's rename, what do I want to do? Switch. Complete the switch. So I'm going to leave it there. I just wanted to kind of show you how I've been making use of the Creator Kit. I'm sure as I get more comfortable with it, I'll find better ways of doing what I'm already doing. These are the key elements that I've been using though to make a pretty good and useful app, and get that kind of consistency, a bit like a Dynamics feel to the application. So I found it particularly nice to work with Dataverse tables, which I think is the way the Power Platform world data-wise is going. Not saying it's the only choice. There are other options that are the right choice depending on the situation, but definitely don't be fearful of using Dataverse, because it's almost too helpful, which throws you a bit